Hello and welcome back to the Yoga Life channel. Happy to have you back. And today in our coaching session, I want to share a bit of a sensitive topic for you. In recent conversations, we have covered with several people actually the topic of death and a loved one passing away. Now, before I go into what I want to share with you, I just want to warn you that this might be a sensitive topic and trigger something in you. If you have recently lost a loved one, or even a while ago, particularly if you have lost a child, I would strongly like to encourage you to pause this video right now and either watch it with someone else or prepare yourself. If you have mental health issues in that regard and you are going through an intense phase of grief, make sure that if this video triggers something, you please call a mental health support line if you need afterwards or during the session. In Australia we have a lifeline, and I'm sure in all the other countries this will be available and you have something similar. So please back yourself up. This video is not here to trigger you, but the intention that I have is to share a perspective that has been a deep inspiration for me. As some of you might know, I'm following a spiritual path that is called Bhakti Yoga. And there is a very interesting, very deeply inspiring perspective on passing away and passing on out of this life. And I'm by no means a very elevated spiritual teacher of any kind. There's definitely gurus and teachers in our lineage that will be able to give you much more depth and much more clarity in this regard. The reason why I'm sharing is this is because it's come up for a few of my clients, and on several occasions it's really made a difference for them to share the story I want to share with you. So whilst I'm not an authority and by no means a spiritual teacher, I want to offer you this perspective. The other little trigger warning I have is this is a spiritual path. So I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong, what you should or shouldn't believe, which religion you should or shouldn't follow. It's literally something that I've come across that has made a major impact on my life. And I just want to offer you this as one way at looking at a scenario of death and the passing away of a loved one. It's a bit of a nervous topic, because it's something I really deeply care about. And I will share with you in a few minutes a story of someone that I find deeply, deeply inspiring. I actually asked them permission a few days ago if it's okay to share this on here. So you know who you are, and I deeply honor you and respect you. I hope I'm not going to start crying. So my background initially spiritually is in Christianity. That's the way I've grown up, in a Lutheran community, and I've done a lot of church work in youth and community over the years through my teenage years, and absolutely loved it. Later in my 30s, I then found this path of Bhakti Yoga. You sometimes hear about it as Gaudiya Vaishnavism. You might also have heard about the Krishnas or the Hare Krishnas. So that's all that same path that I'm following. And the interesting thing is, and one topic that has come up many times for me, is the topic of death. In particular, if it's an untimely death, if it's a very heavy way of dying, like an aggressive cancer, an accident, or the passing away of a child, be it through an accident, be it through an illness, or be it at birth. And one thing that I always found difficult in my Christian path, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, was how do you explain that a loving God, that there is something like a child passing away, because it's not fair. You can't say, well, they deserve it, or well, they had a long life. It's just, it doesn't seem to make sense. And often in discussions on that spiritual level with people would ask this question: how could there be a God if this child has passed away? How could a God, if he was there or she was there and they were a loving entity, how could they possibly let a child pass away? So that was a question I could never really answer, and obviously would hold space for people, but there was nothing much I could say or do. Until I came across this path of Bhakti Yoga. And during the years of being a part and becoming a part of a bigger community of Bhakti yogis. I've seen several people pass away, and I want to share a few insights with you on how this was being done and what the thinking background and the philosophy is around life and death. And I hope this can provide solace to you if this is something that you're going through right now. And it can also provide inspiration and maybe a different angle of thinking that might open up to help you through a stage of grief. So if we are looking in this Bhakti Yoga tradition at what is life and what is death, it's a little bit different from what you will see in other philosophies. The idea mainly being that there is not just one life that we have, but that we are a spirit soul. I've shared that in other talks as well, that we are a spirit soul. And as a spirit soul, we are moving from lifetime to lifetime, from body to body, bit by bit elevating our consciousness and becoming more and more kind of clearer aware, going from probably animal bodies and like lower consciousness into higher consciousness through stages where we initially just focus on eating, mating, procreating, defending, all these kind of things, like a very reactive kind of life, a very instinctive life, to coming to a human position or other like very sentient creatures where there is love, where there's care, and in a human body in particular, where there is a consciousness and a choice about how we want to see things, how we want to decide to live our lives, whether we dedicate our lives to a spiritual path or we want to just live a material life and have fun and enjoy. No judgment in that. The idea being that we have a concept called reincarnation. So like today I'm wearing a pink shirt, yesterday I was wearing a yellow shirt, and maybe the day before a blue one. Our soul passes from body to body, and the kind of body that we are getting in our next life and where we go is determined in this philosophy by two factors. One is the desire we have where we want to go, and number two is the karma that we have accrued. Like, what do we deserve? And this is not the kind of karma that we sometimes see on Facebook posts, like karma's a bitch baby, vengeance sort of thing. It's karma in terms of the idea that there is a loving God, a loving divine entity that, like a loving parent, when we are overstepping into one direction, will gently pull us back or will teach us the lesson that we need, but never in a harsher or harder way than absolutely necessary to teach the child a lesson so that the child can grow up and elevate its consciousness. So obviously, if we have committed heinous crimes like, Adolf Hitler's soul, I guess, they would be going through probably a bunch of hellish lifetimes to work off that karma. And that's probably going too deep into it. But the idea being that karma is not something that is vengeful or bad or hateful, but that karma is a reaction to a previous action that might have happened in earlier lifetimes that will then be balanced out by a reaction. So if I hurt you, maybe in this lifetime, maybe in another lifetime, something similar will happen to me. It gives sometimes quite healthy perspective. I found that really helpful in getting over my own divorce. Anyway, the idea being, where do I desire to go in the moment of death, and what do I deserve? So how far can I get? How close can I get to where I want to be? Just keep that in mind. Now, I know that close to our community there is a hospital, and I've heard on several occasions that nurses have said, you Krishnas really know how to die well. And I had the honor of experiencing this on several occasions, twice with older members of our community and once with a baby in our community. And I want to share those stories because it was so inspirational to see how people would pass on with incredibly dignity and being honored so beautiful by this community. I've seen on other occasions in my own family, luckily not very close family, that people in their last days of their life, being sick with cancer, for example, were really clinging to life and had an incredibly hard time letting go, because their idea was that there's nothing beyond. They were probably atheists, didn't really believe something was there. Life's a big party, it's over. And then suddenly in those last days of their life, there's an incredible fear of what was going to come, like this big darkness that is lurking. And so they were like really dying a very hard death. And it's painful because there was like one of my father's really good friends passed away in this way, and hearing it really, really hurt. And I wish he could have seen the other way that's possible. So in our spiritual community, there was, for example, an older gentleman who had an illness and two kind of choices. One was to keep a certain medication going and then very likely within a few months pass away from, I think, a heart attack that was inevitable to happen, or coming off the medication knowing that within a week roughly he was going to pass away. And he chose to die consciously and to take this step surrounded by community, surrounded by his family. And what this community then does, this Bhakti Yoga community, is that they rallied around this family. I wasn't very close to them, so I wasn't a big part of that, but I watched it and it was amazing. They rallied around the family, would get their shopping done, would get their cleaning done, everything that needed to be taken care of. It was helping this family stay in a really good bubble and being protected and nurtured. It was an older gentleman, so it was also kind of a reasonable to be able to let go. At the same time, some of our community would go and sing mantras for this gentleman, trying to help him elevate his mind and focus on where he wanted to go, which is back to God, which is kind of, I guess in Christianity you could say heaven. In our practice we are saying that we are going home back to Godhead. So he was priming, and the community was priming his focus of desire. Remember, one of the two defining elements of where how we go to our next destination, the priming of the destination being going back to God, or karma-wise as close as possible. So mantra being sung, and obviously with a lot of respect for the family. If the family at some point wouldn't have wanted that in the house, everybody would have left, no problem. So there was this gentle chanting whilst he was still really lucid and feeling well. Also interviews with him, younger members of the community and older members would come and have conversations and learn whatever was there to be learned from someone who was consciously choosing to let go of life bit by bit by bit. Eventually, I was visiting one of the last days. He was in his bed in the room next door. We were still there singing and chanting. And he, in this way, very consciously allowed himself to leave. Obviously, people who are in pain in such a scenario will still get medication, will get, if it's heavier pain, opioids. So there's nothing like you can't have this kind of support, but always done in a way that it's possible, ideally, to stay as lucid and as conscious and as focused as possible. And the family members will surround, and close friends will surround that person and support them, but not in a way where they are making it all about themselves and being clingy and please don't go and please fight harder, but holding space for this person to be able to uplift them and be in the best possible spirit. So that was my first experience with it. And by the way, interesting fun fact as well, interesting fact, we have cows on our farm, and for cows who are ready to pass away, a similar thing is being done, or for other animals. A little tent gets put up when they lie down, and devotees will chant mantra until the cow has actually passed away. That was been a very touching element for me to see that someone would care that much about their animals. That's just as a side note. Now, it comes even more impressive, at least this is an experience I had, and the birth of a little baby was almost exactly 5 years ago, and that was probably one of the most profound observations I was ever allowed to make. So a friend of mine was pregnant and was in the middle of the pregnancy diagnosed that the baby wasn't going to be healthy. And she went through a lot of internal turmoil, as far as I know, in terms of deciding whether she was going to have an abortion or carry to full term, and decided to carry to full term because, again, with the idea that this baby was a spirit soul that was going to come into the world and allow that process to unfold. It was done with a lot of care. It was made sure that there was no major danger to the mother. If not, it would have been decided differently. However, with the genetic defect that the baby had, it was only going to either pass away at birth or usually live for just a couple of days. And however, she was born and she actually lived to the age of 4 months. And this was really special. There were 2 big families and they all came together. I think we others pulled away and held space from further away. But I don't think this baby ever, was laid down in a cot or anything. There was always people around. There was always mantra being chanted. And they knew the baby couldn't live for very long. So they supported the family, held this really tight space. And the amazing thing that I learned in this time was that the idea, remember karma and desire, right? The way the sense was being made of something awful like a little baby passing away, coming to the world in such hard terms, was that this little soul was very likely on the very last journey of many, many lifetimes. They were saying something like this is very likely the last bit of burning of karma before that soul that is otherwise purified and very highly elevated is then ready to go back to God. There was some karma that was unfinished in some previous lifetimes. It's not enough to have one very big, very difficult lifetime, but one where just that last little bit has to be burnt away. And so the family, rather than, and of course this would hurt. I mean, there was a lot of grief in that family, you can trust me, but rather than thinking that this was just an awful thing to happen and absolutely horrible and why would God do this, they all rallied together and actually acknowledged that as a spiritual family it was an incredible honor to carry this soul through these few months and support it on that journey. And it's just truly one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And this baby was so loved and so taken care of. The mother and the father and the little brother were so taken care of. And this family did grieve heavily, but at the same time, they could see it as an honor to serve this child and be there for this child. And it wasn't an idea of an angry God or a vengeful or an unfair God, or maybe there is no God at all. They could see it and make sense for themselves in it, that they were carrying a heavy burden, but they were serving in an incredibly beautiful, honorable, and strong way. And that's how this family got through this. And they are some of the most amazing people I've ever met. And it's been one of the most profound moments on my spiritual journey to witness something like this and witness people band together like this and go on a journey like this together and do it with so much grace and so much honor and beauty. And so if you are going through a stage of grief, if something has happened to you that just doesn't make sense and is not fair, then I hope this story can support you. And I hope it can provide a little bit of solace and a little bit of inspiration, finding a different angle in looking at things. The book that we draw these teachings from, or one of the books, is called Bhagavad Gita. And I will drop a link at the bottom in the comment section to a version of the Bhagavad Gita that is very easily accessible and understandable for people who haven't heard much about the spiritual path or don't know much about it, so that if you want to have a read, you can easily access that and take this as a starting point if you want to explore this information in a deeper way. Again, if this is a trigger for you, if this has brought up heavy emotions and you're sitting here, it's hard enough for me being emotional about it, and I haven't even been the person who has lost a loved one in this way. Make sure that you get yourself support. Get on the phone with someone right now who is going to be there for you and able to hold space, or call Lifeline or one of those hotlines that provide grief counseling or mental health support. Don't stick around with this alone unless you are really, really sure that you can handle it. If this is part of your journey right now, I wish you all the best on your journey, and I wish that at some point, whenever you are ready to let go and you're ready to move on with your life, you will come out healed and stronger than you ever have been, and able to hold that loved one dear in your heart without grieving all too badly. All the best for you, and thank you very much for watching till the end. If you like this content, as always, you know where the subscribe button is, and thank you very much for sticking around.